Hello, everyone. Thank you once again for coming to this Men's Peaceful Solution Character Education corresponding with certification class. Correspondence for all of you that are overseas that are watching at this time. Once again, I would like to thank you once again for your notes. I want to give you an announcement at the beginning of the class, and we'll remake it for those that will join in with us here as we go. The next class we will have will be 4/7 of 2021, 4/7 of 2021. So it's going to be about a week and a half why us as certified teachers, we're actually going to go in for some more certification ourselves. So we're going to take off for about a week and a half, and that will allow everyone, I know there's many people that are watching these classes online, go back and rewatch them. They're all there for you on the official Peaceful Solution. So please go back and rewatch them, and it will help you if you're just tuning in to watching them. Go all the way back to the beginning, which goes back to the November of last year, and it will help you build up to see where we're going and what we're talking about as we continue on with Chapter 5, and that's where David left off last week. So as we're taking off for about a week for more certification ourselves, please go back through and rewatch these classes again, and that'll have your mindset for where we're going to be going in what direction. And remember that we're always building. The Peaceful Solution Character Education Program is always building. It's a program that's meant to lay a firm foundation and then build slowly upon that, not take it and throw it all on at one time. It's a gradual process. It requires a lot of patience with others and also with ourselves, but it's something that we have to put forth that effort to do, and that's very important to remember, especially with what we're getting into tonight. And be turning over to page 105. We're going to go over some things that David would have covered last class, and of course he started chapter 5 entitled The Ripple Effect, and he talked about how character and society work hand in hand. And looking down to the first paragraph there, the very last sentence of the first paragraph, he read that when a group of people live under a common body of laws and share common values and interests, of course, they're called a society. Now, we have to be honest with ourselves when we look out into what we call a society, a global society, and we look at that common body of laws. And the one thing that we see today that truly ripples out is many different people have many different opinions on how to apply that body of laws. And it starts a lot of confusion in our society. And a lot of people always ask, if we have a common body of laws, but people interpret them very differently, then how can the Peaceful Solution help and assist in that? It goes all the way back to the beginning. If anything causes you to hurt yourself, someone else, or the environment, it should be deemed unnecessary. It should never be done. You should never do something that brings harm to yourself, someone else, or the environment. And that's the very basis of what decision making is made upon in the Peaceful Solution. And of course, laws are supposed to be there to keep society safe. So if anything would ever come up that would cause harm, you can always go back and fall upon the knowledge of knowing that if this will bring harm to me, if this will bring harm to someone else, if this is going to harm the environment or society, is that in part of that environment, if it's going to bring harm to any of those things, then I should not do it. So keep that in mind. And he also covered, notice it says in the same way here in the second paragraph, in the same way character shapes an individual. And we're talking about either being shaped in a positive form or a negative form, either being a benefit to society or a hindrance to society. And that's the shape we're talking about here. It says it can also shape society, which in turn forms our nation. In essence, character can shape our world, and character has shaped our world, and it's not the best shape right now. If you were to compare it with someone, speaking of someone athletic or not athletic, if you were talking about whether you're in shape physically, well, our world's not in the best of shape right now, and we can see that with the many challenges that our world faces with. And we'll get into this tonight, but keep this in mind with disease. The COVID virus kind of put us on a global scale, a society, to where we started looking at other countries, and we see other countries still going through COVID virus right now. And it's and many people say that there's no end in sight, and it looks like it is that way until we change the way we live, the way we conduct ourselves, because a lot of these diseases, as many physicians will tell you, we bring upon ourselves through our choices. And that's what the Peaceful Solution is trying to, help us to get a hold of and help us to see. But even through acts of aggression, when countries turn on other countries, if you're in the United States and you're used to buying lumber that is processed from offshore lumber mills that China owns, you've seen certain pieces of lumber go from a year ago they were $7 a sheet to today they're $36 a sheet. And that's a ripple effect of many disagreements, many sanctions, and of course many tariffs that are placed on items. That ripple effect, if you're running a business, as China is running a business and also the United States, that government is not willing to pay those tariffs. They're just going to pass them along to the consumer. And we're going to look how many decisions, not just governmental decisions, but decisions that we make ourselves on an everyday basis, how truly they affect not only the person that lives beside of us, the person that lives down the road, the person that lives in the same state, same country, but how it affects us on a global scale, the entire world. But notice here in the second paragraph also, continuing on, it says a choice. And that's something we all have to make on a daily basis, is a choice. A choice, either positive or negative, starts with one person. And that one person is you have to go look into the mirror. Each and every one of us, that choice starts with us, one person. We cannot look at someone else for the choice that we've made. We can't blame someone else for the choice that we made or the choices we're making. We can only look into the mirror and recognize the choice is made by us. Now, we can say it was due to a lack of education or that we should have known better, but it's still our choice to make. But it starts with one person, but can affect not only that one person, but also a family, a society, and once again, even the world. And once again, notice that last paragraph. We live in a society where our need to belong makes us interdependent. And he covered that interdependent is different than being dependent. Like if we're dependent only on ourselves, independency. If you're interdependent, it requires each other. I need you, you need me. In a society, we need each other. And in a society, that is something, it's proven, even if you get down into the very basic principles of, if you've ever seen where people are moving to Alaska to live off the grid. They live off the grid, but they still need food. They still travel supplies in. If you even go to a prison system, we've had one of our teachers talk about his experience in prison and solitary confinement and the need to just hear a voice, to just communicate a little bit with someone, how the lack of that actually will start mentally bothering a person to the extent where you feel like you're going crazy. But we need each other, and our choices and the way we conduct our lives, we're going to talk about again tonight, how much we can affect even those that have not even been born yet. We can actually cause problems, deathly problems, illness, sickness, to those who have not even been born, and we can plan a murder. We can plan a murder before the conception ever takes place. And we'll take a look at that and see how. But once again, our ability to affect each other is like a stone dropped in a pond, causing one ripple after the next, each one larger than the one before. And turning over to page 106, David read a little bit about how the two most devastating results of negative character in our society and our world are violence and crime. And tonight we're going to discuss a little bit about how that is actually where one group will say this is a crime, another group will say no, it's your right to do this or to do that. It's your right. Now, this body of laws that we're talking about that's supposed to keep society safe is being interpreted two different ways to where lives are being lost. And that's how serious the interpretation of a body of laws can be on affecting a society, to where one group can say this is okay and another group can say it's not okay, but the decision determines whether someone lives or dies. And that can be a very horrific series of events that take place there. So keeping that in mind with this ripple effect and how our decisions affect others, if you look over to the lesson plan here, because we're going back into lesson plan 4, and for those of you that might be thinking, you know, we're talking about, you mentioned murder and how they can take place. The Peaceful Solution is a program that bases itself on character and the building of positive character. We are not influenced by politics or politicians, politics. We're not funded by organizations that try to sway us one way or the other. We merely go off of scientific facts that either prove or disprove that something is true or not true, or that is valid or not valid, and we build upon making decisions on those things. And once again, if it brings harm to someone else, yourself, or the environment, those very basic principles tell us whether we should or should not do it. And we'll learn tonight, going through this procedure here, that whenever we make decisions that cause harm to someone else, even to those who have not yet been born, we put the problem on the child not yet born, but the problem started with those involved of the creation, or the teachers of those, the parents of those that were involved in the creation of a child, but the child pays the ultimate price for bad decisions. And we'll look at that a little bit more, because we're going to learn that we live in a society, but we're not the center of the universe. It's not all about us. So, procedure 4 here. It says, explain to students that when people are influenced to engage in risk-taking behaviors, this produces a negative effect on themselves, their friends, families, as well as the community. Have students read the section found on page 113 to 115 entitled, It's Not Just About Me. Remind students that by setting their minds in advance to internalize positive character traits, they can avoid many of these destructive behaviors. So if you'll turn over, we're going to put our finger on that page. If you'll turn over to page 113, that's where we want to go, 113, and put your finger there. And I know we're going to cover some things tonight that cause a lot of separation and division, and there'll be some people that say, I just can't agree with that. The only thing that we ask is listen to what's being brought. When you teach your students, obviously, in a school, you're not allowed to bring out certain things as being right or wrong. Certain teachers are governed to where they cannot address certain topics that we're going to address tonight. But in a school atmosphere, you would have to be, you'd really have to ask the guidance counselor's permission, can we discuss this topic or not? So be mindful when you go into a school where one school can say, by all means, go ahead. Some schools have asked us, please address this topic. Some schools say, no, we think that's the student's right to do so. And obviously that decision is made upon the ideology of the person that tells us we can or we can't. And one school to the next will change from one to the next. But of course, the procedure here told us to remind our students about setting their mind in advance. So it's always great to go back over to page 80. Page 60 and page 80 are your two most common pages you're always going to be flipping back to, and that's influences and setting your mind in advance. And of course, once again, we're going to cover the first and second paragraph. It's very short, but there's a lot of information in that. And it says, have you ever heard the saying, it's all in your head? Most people say it sarcastically, but there's some truth to it. Whether you are aware of it or not, every action begins with a thought. And that's something that we want to rehearse continually and put into the mind of our students, especially as teachers. But once again, we're doing this for ourselves. It's not just for our students like they're the only one that needs this. We continually, our minds and our bodies are like a car that needs gas. If you don't continually fill it with this knowledge that comes forth as a reminder, you'll run out and some really bad decisions can be made. But once again, notice it says, setting your mind in advance to maintain your positive character traits begins first by considering just how important it is to have a moral character. Now, when we consider how important it is to have a moral character, that's not just how important it is for myself to have a moral character, but for everyone in society. And the only way that I can contribute myself, that choice that I make and that you make, and that's what we want to get across to our students, because most people, when I say get across to our students, we want them to believe this. Because you'll find the most challenging thing, and this, I hear this from all parts of the world. We're teaching in a country right now where we're translating books, and it's very hard to get a society that is poor, impoverished, and a lot of violence takes place. It's very hard to get people to believe this. But when you tell somebody that if you make the right choice, this will ripple out and you can help others, and it will build and build and build as a train slowly takes off. It builds up steam, and then it reaches great power. When you go into a country that is very impoverished, if you're teaching in other countries, and I know there's many countries watching right now, you always want to ask the students, if you don't start, who will? If you're not going to help make it better, who's going to? And you'll find that here in the United States, we can freely teach these things. In other countries, not so easy. Not so easy at all. In fact, some people would even fear for their life making comments about what we're going to talk about tonight. They would fear actually something being done to them. Now, we're never telling you in the Peaceful Solution, when you set your mind in advance how you're going to teach your class also. Being mindful of when you walk into a place to teach, that's their auditorium, that's their classroom, that's their school. We need to go by their rules. If they say we would like for you to not get too much on this topic, and the topic we're going to talk about tonight is abortion. If they request that, then obviously you'll have to teach this. We're not going to condone it. We're not going to say it's a great thing to do, but you have to be careful of how you bring it. That's part of us keeping honesty with them. But we're not going to ever say that this is something you can do if you made a bad choice. So keep that in mind. And I hope we tie all this together, because once again, getting people to think and understand that if you do this, you can make a difference. It will ripple outward. That can be your greatest challenge, getting people to believe that they can make a difference, especially when you look at society. You go into these huge cities of Lagos, Nigeria, Mexico City, and so forth, where you have 20 plus million people. And you have a group of people looking around saying, I can make a difference with all of these people. You know, in society, it takes, as David brought out last week, one stone will ripple across the whole pond. But someone has to drop the stone. Someone has to do it. And when someone does it, people don't like being stolen from. People don't like the crime and the violence affecting their families, the societies they live in. They don't like it, but they honestly don't know what to do. Well, the Peaceful Solution is there to help them set their mind in advance to, if we do this, it's not going to be overnight, but we can make a difference. If we don't do it, a difference can never be made. It's like expecting shade from a tree you've never planted. The only way you can get the shade from the tree is if you plant it, you nurture it, you take care of it, and then years later, you can enjoy it. But if you never planted it, don't expect it to yield anything to you. That's the same way with character education and the Peaceful Solution with what we're talking about here. But continuing back to this first paragraph, it says, to be trusted, admired, respected, and known as an honest, reliable, compassionate person is something you should want. And I dare say many, many, many people want this, especially when they were dishonest or they did something that brings reproach against their reputation. They really, really would. Politicians do this all the time. We see what the news media would call people of importance. It seems like when someone makes a bad decision, they put it out on every news station for everybody to see, and everybody knows their bad decisions. But we all make bad decisions, and that's something we have to be honest with ourselves. We all make bad choices, and ours aren't always displayed out there. So be careful how we allow our minds to be formed and shaped when looking at others, because we can become a very negative person and prejudging someone, so to speak, and thinking that they can't change, because we teach in the Peaceful Solution, and we've already spoken that everyone has the opportunity to make a difference. It says the next step is to make your mind up not to be influenced to do anything that will compromise your character. In other words, determine in your mind that no one can talk you into doing something you know is wrong. And if you don't have that underlined or highlighted, underline you know. You have the knowledge, or you have the power. You could easily reread that and really put it in your mind that determining in your mind that no one can talk you into doing something you have the power, that you have the power to know is wrong, or you have this knowledge to know it's wrong, because knowledge is power and power is knowledge. And the use of knowledge or the use of this power will determine whether we're a positive or negative person. You can have the knowledge of something and ignore it. It won't make the bad results, as the children in the schools we go to, that we call them consequences, but they say bad results. It won't make them go away. It won't make them disappear just because we chose to do something that was wrong. Well, once again, when we do this, when we actually set our minds to not be influenced in a negative way, this is called setting your mind in advance. And then it gives us an example here. It says, you know that stealing is wrong. Set your mind in advance to always respect another person's property as you would want others to respect yours. And I dare think that most people would say, I can agree with that. I wouldn't believe in taking someone else's property. I wouldn't do anything like that. But I want you to think, and I'm not going to mention certain countries, but think about countries on a governmental level and how many countries are knowingly taking things that belong to other countries right now. And we support it, or we do not support it. Because if we support someone taking someone else's possessions, it doesn't matter whether it's someone's pencil in school, someone's car on the street, someone's oil in their oil fill, it's still stealing. It's still taking something that didn't belong to us. So please keep in mind, and I'm not trying to say get your students to go out and start a march in Washington, D.C. by any means, but it's very important that we keep a straight perspective about what's right and wrong. Because if many people like downgrading government, and when we go into schools, it's amazing how many children, even though they can't vote, they feel that they have a political mind. And they'll disagree with that and disagree with this and disagree with that. And I always ask them, well, what are you going to do about it? I'm going to vote them out. Well, why, if you don't like the decision, why don't you make the change yourself? Why don't you learn the better way and get involved and make that change? Don't always expect someone else to do it. You can't say, well, I voted for this person, they didn't win, so it's going to continue to be bad. You can run for office too. You just have to have the right guidance. Any president can make a right decision if they have the right guidance, and a lot of people don't understand that. Presidents make decisions off of their staff who give them information, and they give them guidance. They make decisions. Well, you can actually be one of those people too, but we're talking about doing it with positive character. But looking over to page 113 here, we just got ourselves, our mindset on setting our minds in advance to not do things that will bring harm. We have this knowledge or this power to make proper decisions. And here on page 113, once again, it's not just about me. And that's the most important person to each and every one of us, right? Ourselves. I'm the most important person I can think of. That's the way a lot of people say that. But notice it says here, starting page 113, even if you do not commit a crime or perform a violent act, your wrong choices can still have a negative effect on others. Not setting your mind in advance to maintain positive moral character can make you susceptible or more prone to behaviors that will jeopardize the health and safety of yourself and others. Now, that word susceptible means to be subject to something. So you're subject to something. You open yourself up to something. And notice here's some really risk-taking behaviors. You'll notice here it says all of these choices. Once again, choices, and where does the choice start with? Always have your students, have them pull up their finger like this. Where does the choice start? It always starts with us. No matter what you've been taught, no matter what you've seen, you still have to choose to do it. Now, that's not saying that if you're taught wrong, you'll probably choose to do things that are wrong. And that's why it's so important for us to work hard to make a difference as teachers and to teach our students to make a difference. In 12 years, you can teach a whole generation of students. That would do a lot in society if you just taught a generation of students to make better choices. You would have a great thing going. But that's a challenge in itself. But our choices start with us, but the power to make the right choice starts with the educators, the parents, and the guardians. They have to offer that to the children, to the young adults, to make better choices. But notice here are some of the ones. Premarital sex, and that That will bring you a challenge sometimes using the word premarital. Once again, the peaceful solution is not religious. We're just merely trying to expound on how we're trying to show that we're talking about commitments here. And scientific studies show, and we'll get into some of that tonight, that when people do not make commitments and they start engaging widely in relationships like this, it brings forth disease. That's not a religious comment. That's a scientific fact. And anybody can Google this very easily, and we'll show some tonight, to where these things are very common, and it's spreading. It's gaining ground to where we can see that there's people making choices, but they don't have the knowledge to make these choices. They don't really know that these things are taking place. Now, excessive consumption of alcohol, of course, that damages the body. Use of drugs and inhalants confuses the mind to where a person can't make a sensible decision, damages the brain, many times permanently. Dangerous driving habits, once again, you get into here before long, we're going to get into the 100 deadliest days of summer that we've spoken about before. That goes from Memorial Day to Labor Day for high school students, and that's when the majority of them are killed in traffic accidents. And the number is extremely high. And of course, the improper handling of guns. And that can take place with someone that can be trained to handle guns. I remember a few years back, it's been many years back, where even the vice president was shot on a bird hunting trip. The man didn't intentionally mean to shoot him, and the man had been using a gun his whole life, was up in his, I think 60s or 70s, that accidentally shot the vice president. Didn't intend to do it, but it still took place. So we can't just look at that and go, children, if you touch guns without knowing, you can know whenever a child shoots themselves because a gun is laying around, that is improper handling of a gun by the person who owned the gun to begin with. We can look at the child and say they shouldn't have had it, but it starts, and that's why there's laws that govern that there's consequences for that. But all of these behaviors are risk-taking behaviors. I want to show you some things fairly quickly while we look at this, and this is something I printed off. I wrote the time on it here at 2:06 p.m. And the reason I wrote the time down is because the number was changing faster than the seconds were moving. So to get the magnitude of what was taking place, I kind of had to put the time on, because this changed greatly. But this right here is abortions worldwide this year, and these are reported abortions. They're at 9,283,585. Now, it says here that according to the World Health Organization, every year in the world there are an estimated 40 to 50 million abortions. This corresponds to approximately 125,000 abortions a day. Now, in the United States, that's where we're based here. The Peaceful Solution is based here in Abilene, Texas. In the United States, it says where nearly half of pregnancies are unintended. Once again, let me read that again. Where nearly half of pregnancies are unintended and 4 of 10 are terminated. So out of every 10 pregnancies, 4 of them are terminated. Now, and I know there'll be a discussion, there always is a discussion, whether is it alive, is it dead? Is it really, if it's, and I'll quote the author of The Peaceful Solution. When you take an abortion, if you want to argue that it's not alive, then why do you have to kill it? Why do you have to terminate life if it's not a living thing? Just let it carry its course. And once again, we're not here to insinuate or instigate or propagate. We're not here to march out in front of organizations like Planned Parenthood or so forth. We're just merely saying scientific facts show that a child can learn from within the womb. And that's in our parenting manual, and we'll get to that eventually. But scientific fact shows that. When an abortion takes place, they shut life off to an object or to an entity. They have to terminate. If you terminate something, you end it. Why do you terminate it? Because it's a growing entity. It's something that is getting bigger and bigger and growing and growing and getting bigger. So please keep that in mind, because when you have half of these pregnancies are unintended and 4 out of 10 end in the termination of something that is alive. That's why it's terminated. The problem isn't that we need to have more terminations. The problem is we need to educate these unintended pregnancies, and the people that are doing it, we need to help them make better choices. This argument over abortion should never exist. It should be more of preparing the mind of people to have children, and the very important decisions they're making when they feel that they're only satisfying themselves with a certain choice. It's an act of a creation of a life. These are just scientific facts. Whenever someone can look at this as a creation of a human life, they would tend to understand that this is a very serious choice that I'm making here. This is a possibility, a real possibility, that I could be a parent in just 9 months, 9 months, right around there. I better have some responsibility to myself. That's just facts. It's not political. It's not religious. It's scientific facts. But we can look back and say, well, we don't have to tell our children this. These are okay. Well, what are we doing to our children? What are we doing to them by not educating them about these bad choices? You can Google this. Just Google how many cases of herpes are in the United States. Just Google that. This is what you'll get. It says it is estimated in the United States 47.8% of people ages 14 to 49 have HSV, or herpes simplex virus 1, while 11.9% of Americans in the same age group have HS2, or the herpes simplex virus 2. And that was in 2017. So theoretically, this means that over 195 million people in the United States might have genital herpes. That's over half. That's a lot of people. Now, you know, in schools, the guidance counselors we talk to, they refer that as the gift that keeps on giving, because it doesn't go away. Most children that we've dealt with that they have depression because they've contracted this, no one ever told them, once you get it, it's there. You're going to have outbreaks for the rest of your life. Now, there's pharmaceuticals they can give you. It's like a sleeping pill. But the sleeping pill wears off after a while and it wakes up again. And it's a very real thing you have to live with. You can't go to a doctor and they can't terminate it. It's a life that's within you and it's going to keep growing. But also, you can get the human papillomavirus, or known as HPV. And you can do the same thing. Just Google how many cases of HPV are in the United States. Very easy thing to Google. And it says here that the human papillomavirus, or HPV, a hidden epidemic in the United States. It says the human papillomavirus, or HPV, is the most commonly sexually transmitted infection, or STI, in the United States, with an estimated 24 million active cases and 5.5 million new cases each year, and that's according to the National Cancer Institute. And if you're not aware and you're asking yourself, why would the National Cancer Institute be doing a study on STIs or STDs? Well, this STD leads to many types of cancer. Oral cancer, cervical cancer, and so forth. Some other very disgusting cancers in the body. Not that they're not all disgusting, but this is what takes place. This, once again, is something that you can't go to the doctor and have it terminated. When you make these choices that also create pregnancy, they create children, they also create, when you're not committed in a relationship, when you're mixing many things, they lead to diseases. It's a recipe of diseases. Once again, these are scientific facts. These are not politically motivated. They're not opinions of an author that wrote The Peaceful Solution. These are scientific facts that anyone can go Google. They can download. You can get them from the CDC. You can get them from many organizations, the Kaiser Family Foundation. These are recognized, globally recognized organizations that are making these statements. And we as the Peaceful Solution are standing behind, saying we need to give ear to this. We need to see that the choices that our young people and older people are making need to change because it's bringing harm to ourselves, someone else, or the environment. But whenever someone wants to go out and fulfill a certain desire, it's really all just about me, right? That's kind of the way it's looked at. And then think of the fatherless children that also arrive from these where the children are born, where the father runs out, the mother runs out, so to speak. We've really created a bad recipe in society for bringing forth a positive atmosphere. So we have to make some changes, a lot of changes. And then, of course, you notice here it said dangerous driving habits. You can just search dangerous driving habits or the result of them. Once again, this is Google. Every year, more than 1.25 million people die in accidents on the road. 1.25 million people. That's an enormous amount of people. Millions more suffer injuries, often life-altering injuries. So the ones that don't die, there's many, many people that their lives are changed. Not everyone, but many people, their lives are changed. Now, you can say, well, 1.25 million people, I had a wreck last week and I'm okay. Well, do you know what next week holds for you? We don't know. But if we could get everyone to observe these traffic laws, that once again, once the wreck occurs, what are you going to do? You can feel bad about it, racing, drinking, driving. Think about how our choices affect others. If we're drinking and driving and we hit someone and kill them, what did that person do that was deserving to be hit and killed by a drunk driver? Our actions affect other people. They truly do. And then, of course, you see here about the drugs. Now, this study comes from Fast Stats, drugs overdose, and this is a national vital statistics system that is created by the federal government, and they list drug overdoses in 2018 as only 67,367, and that was before the opioid epidemic came out. And I tried to get stats related to last year, but I've noticed they don't have the stats up for 2020 yet. So we'll bring them when we get them because the opioid epidemic skyrocketed overdoses here in the United States. But 67,000 people that overdose, if you would just think about that, that's like half the city of Abilene overdosing. That would be just about half. Now, there's a lot more than that. If you remember in the news here just a year ago, they were setting up, before COVID, they were setting up freezer systems, trailers to house the bodies in Ohio because of the huge opioid epidemic. And some cities have thought, well, the best way to do it is set up facilities, bring them in, give them clean needles, and give them drugs so they're not looking for them elsewhere. If we bring harm to someone else by allowing them to do drugs, that doesn't help them. It can't help them. And once again, not a political statement, we have to face the facts. We can't continue to make choices that are detrimental to society. And that's what we have to get across to our students. If we tell them 100 positive things, and we really try to get it stuck in their mind, but the 101st thing that we tell them is, well, you can bend on this one a little bit now. Now, people tell you got to do it, but you really ain't got to do it. That allows for our society to continue the spiral downwardly. And we can't do that. We have to very kindly, generously with education, and abundantly with knowledge being poured out through doing what is right and proven methods that don't bring harm. Proven methods that don't bring harm. And it's very important that we do that. Now, looking at back to page 113, it says the consequences of choosing to engage in these behaviors, and this is some that we've looked at up above, and once again, choosing. We have to choose. Now, I know that a lot of people will say, well, not everyone chooses. Very few people choose to be raped. That's not what they're looking for. And we'll get to that later, but we're talking about willful choices at this time. So please understand that with what we're reading, we're talking about willful choices where people willingly participate. So the consequences of choosing to engage in these behaviors will affect not only you, but will ripple outward to your family, friends, and even the community. Risky behaviors can alter your life and rob you of a healthy mind and body. Now, once again, as we talked about the HPV and why the National Cancer Institute is doing studies on it, you can contract HPV at a very young age. And you think, no symptoms. They just say I test positive. I don't feel anything. If you've ever known someone that has cancer, it's amazing how they don't feel anything. They feel just fine. And then one day, something just don't seem right. And when they go get a checkup, I'm sorry, Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so, but you have stage 4 cancer. You have 6 months to live. But I just started feeling bad 2 days ago. STDs or STIs, HPV, is the same way. When you contract it early in life, doesn't feel anything, it don't hurt, can't be that bad. But when the cancer shows later on in life, whether it be through the upper part of the body or the lower part of the body, it's hard to get rid of. In fact, it's proven nearly impossible to get rid of. It's a challenge. But these are decisions that we made as young adults. And then when you look at children who are born with STDs, HIV, there are children that are born with herpes. There are doctors that do cesareans because the mother has outbreaks and they have to do cesareans to try to prevent the herpes from spreading to the child. These are things that can be prevented. And think about a child entering life and being born HIV positive, addicted to cocaine, or any of these other unnecessary things that are taking place to children that are just being born. These are how our choices ripple out and they affect others. Just within the first few seconds of their life, they're already suffering. And it's a sad thing. But saying it's a sad thing and woe is me is not what we're supposed to do. Making and educating others in our classes will make a difference. Notice here, premarital sex results in sexually transmitted diseases. That's a scientific fact. Please Google it. If you do not agree with that terminology, you can say relationships without commitment cause STDs also. It's the point of saying that you cannot have a group of people, as in Georgia, where the whole high school decided to have huge illicit parties, we'll say, and they all got to know each other extremely well, and then the whole school ended up with herpes. This can be prevented, but it has to be talked about and it has to be discussed properly. We can't just say take a pill or use this, try to hide yourself from contracting something. Scientific studies show you can't hide from it. If you make bad choices, bad things come from them. Once again, notice it also leads to unwanted pregnancies, abortions, and dropouts from school. A lot of young ladies, that's where they get stuck, especially in school. When I was in high school, there was a young man that got 3 girls pregnant, all 3 at the same time. And I remember asking him, because I knew him, I said, what are you going to do? Not my problem, that's their problem, is what he said. And all 3 of those girls dropped out of school. And they were, one was 15 and the other 2 were 16. But I thought, man, so young to, now you're bringing another child in and you're in the 10th grade yourself. What a challenge. Not impossible to do, but a challenge, huge challenge. But once again, engaging in this premarital sex or relationships without commitments can mean facing the shame and embarrassment of contracting diseases such as herpes, gonorrhea, syphilis, or HIV. And think about this, and we try to put this in the mind of our students. If you're just making choices because you want to experiment with your bodies, one, your body's not something you experiment with. Because if the experiment goes wrong, you have to live with it. You can't just go back and hit a restart button like the video games do. You have to live with your experiment. Two, let's say you do something and, this person, they really love me. And then they give you gonorrhea, syphilis, herpes, HPV, and then they leave you. What occurs when you find somebody that really wants to be with you, and as your relationship grows, you have to go, by the way, I got to tell you, I have herpes. How would that make you feel? That's something that our children, students, should be taught to consider having to have that conversation before they get it. It will go a long way if they can have it in their mind, this right here can cause this. And later in life, I'm going to have to tell someone, if you really care about them, because you can't hide it. You can't go through a marriage for 30 years or a relationship for 30 years and hide that you have herpes. It just don't work that way. And even syphilis and gonorrhea eventually show themselves. HIV shows itself really fast. I know there's a lot of drugs they put out there that say you can live longer, but you still have to live with the disease and the restrictions that come with the disease, and then the disease, as study shows, terminates the person themselves. Notice here it says, recent studies indicate that there are over 100 sexually transmitted diseases, and the numbers are still increasing. In fact, last study, if you Google it, it's at 129 and still going up. Some of these diseases can make you sterile or kill you. They can literally destroy your life. And I'll tell you just quickly, there was a teacher came into my store, and we were talking about character education. Never intended to get on this topic. But she told me, she said, I want to tell you how this destroyed my life. And I was like, character education destroyed your life? No. The lack of character, how it destroyed my life. She said when she was young, she had a relationship with a man in college, and they told her she tested positive for herpes from having her relationship. Said first one she ever had. And she said she was so heartbroken, she realized I can never have a family. I might as well give up. And she was in, I think, her 50s or 60s. She had to be somewhere in there. And I thought, because she asked me, how many children do you have? And I told her how many children I had. And she said, I would have loved to have had children. I said, well, was there options? She said, oh, there was options. When I got tested later on in life and found out I tested positive falsely when I was younger, that I really didn't have it. But her whole life was gone. She was beyond the stage of where she could have had children. And she lived her whole life as a single lady because she didn't want to do something to cause harm to someone else. Not many people would do that, even when it was a false positive, still cared enough to try to guard people. That says a lot about a person's character. Now, babies born to unwed teenage mothers or parents that are not committed to each other are also more likely to be neglected, abused, and sexually molested. Once again, we create an atmosphere to where it's hard to bring up children in this environment when you have parents that are uneducated to a matter, parents that I still want to grow up and enjoy myself. Someone else needs to watch the child. And you take the child to the neighbor. Would you know the neighbor? No, but I want to go to the club tonight. These are real things, and that's where this takes place. This abuse, this inappropriate touching of children, it's common in society. We can turn our heads and say it doesn't take place, but when you're teaching in a school, once again, you're guaranteed you've got students sitting there right in front of you that could look at you and go, oh, you ain't got to tell me. I know I've lived it. I'm living it right now. We've had that take place before. And it's hard. It's hard to look at a child and know that, okay, the child knows it's wrong. Now who's going to help? It's difficult knowing, well, I'm leaving the school here in a little bit. You never forget the children that tell you these things, though. And you really try to work with the schools to help them. And really, we found out principals' hands are tied also. It says, notice here, excessive consumption of alcohol, drugs, and inhalants is addictive and can do permanent damage to your brain. You might have started doing it because of your trust or care for a friend, or just wanting to fit in or not wanting to be left out. This making decisions. And write down underneath here, we're not going to turn back to it, but write down underneath this paragraph is important because these are go-back areas. Page 19, speaking of uneducated, remember, that covered the inhalants, where someone tries to get you to do something. And once again, we talked about how if someone's sniffing glue and they say, it hasn't hurt me, that's not a great person to ask if it's causing damage. Because they wouldn't know if it's damaging or not. They're sniffing the stuff, And then you have page 70, which talks about the peer power or peer pressure, how it can be positive or negative. And then also write down page 60 for influences. Remember, they can also be positive or negative because all of these things are what we're talking about here when we're making decisions just to fit in. Turning over here to page 114, it says, you might even think, oh, just once won't hurt anything. But in many cases, just once has brought permanent injury to the body and brain. There's a lot of people that overdose on their first attempt, their first experiment. Some illegal substances are so addictive that once is all it takes. Once again, some illegal substances are so addictive that once is all it takes, and what starts off as just for fun can change your life. You know, and I want you to think about when this book was written, there are drugs that were considered and called illegal. Scientists were showing they damage the body, which is now legal in the United States. You know, I read something the other day that said, who would have thought in 2021 it would be legal to gather with your family and smoke weed, but illegal to gather? So gathering with your family is illegal, but smoking marijuana is legal. Now, once again, we talked about these laws where there's disagreements. If you have years of studies showing that marijuana is detrimental to the mind, if I tell you the law says you can smoke it in this state, does that make it healthy now? That's like saying you can get hit by a car in California and you'll die, but if you get hit by one in Idaho, you'll live. No, if you get hit by a car, you know, in both states, depending on how you get hit, if you take poison, it's going to hurt. It's going to be detrimental. I don't care what state says it's okay and what state doesn't, and you're going to find yourself challenged abundantly by saying illegal drugs in school. Well, it's not illegal in that state. Well, you're not in that state, and it's still damaging. Scientific studies show it doesn't hurt to print out some studies that show that it's damaging. If it's damaging in Texas, it's damaging in North Carolina, to Louisiana, to Alaska, to Montana. It's going to damage everywhere, not just in certain states. The soil in the state doesn't grow marijuana that doesn't kill you, or cocaine or anything else. And you know, one thing a officer told me, it's amazing how the illegal marijuana can come up through Mexico, through Laredo, Texas, and get into certain states, and it's legal once it gets to the state. But it was illegal the whole way up. But once it got there, it's legal. That's these body of rules that we've got to really examine. Why are we making decisions? Is it for money or is it for health? Is it for character, building a positive society, or is it to just try to generate revenue? Well, some illegal substances, once again, are so addictive that once is all it takes, and what starts off just for fun can change your life. Some people are unaware that they have a heart problem, dying after trying cocaine just once. They literally drop dead. Substances like alcohol or even inhalants might not cause immediate death, but they can cause many people to do foolish things that they would not ordinarily do. And we're talking about confusing the mind, kind of blurring the knowledge that you have. You know, you have to, when you know it's foolish to do something, and once you do it, the ability to make the next sound decision is not always there. So you have to make sound decisions when you have the ability to make them. Otherwise, you'll find yourself making very foolish decisions with a very confused mind. In other words, these risky behaviors lead to taking even more risks that could eventually cost you your safety or the safety of someone you care about. Engaging in risky behaviors is not just one individual's choice. Once again, engaging in risky behaviors is not just about one individual's choice. So it's not just about what we want, it affects others. These effects of these behaviors ripple outward, affecting family members as well. The strain of dealing with a child who is addicted to alcohol or drugs, or who is pregnant or suffering from an STD, can be very difficult on parents and friends. And once again, when you bring these out in the school, you have to be very mindful. Don't ever hesitate to ask guidance counselors, what is the STD problem in your school? Don't ever hesitate to ask them. Because when you go in, you want an idea of what you're talking to. We went into a school one time, guidance counselors didn't say a word, and we were talking about how bullying can lead to suicide. No one told us they had found a child just, I think it was 4 or 5 months before that, down Laredo, Texas. They hung themselves in the gym. And we were actually teaching the classroom that he was in. No one told us that. That would have been very nice to know, that we were dealing with a group of young students, men, young boys, girls, men and women, that had been through this experience. That would have been nice to know, but you would have never known it from the joking that was taking place about it. The only way we found out is the joking kind of led up to, what do you mean? What are you talking about? It was still funny to them. So obviously nothing had been done to address that problem. And these are the things that you're going to find, but you have to be very careful because you're dealing with young people that they might already think there's no hope for them, and you don't want to go in and say, if you get these diseases, you're done. No, you still have hope. You still can make right choices, and this is how we're going to do it. There's a plan for it, and we're going to show you the plan. And we're going to work with them too, not just lead them, but work with them. So continuing here, it says, yes, parents have feelings too. And finding out that their child has engaged in one or more risky behaviors, they feel shocked, disappointed, and even embarrassed. They might feel helpless and doubt their ability to properly raise a child. Now, parents are there to supply the ability to make right choices. All we can do is create the environment to make right choices. We can't make choices for our children. If a child does something that's wrong, well, we did too growing up. Some choices are pretty permanent, though. But as parents or as teachers, it's our job to create the environment and to give them the knowledge. That's the power to make the choices. It's always going to be left up to each individual to make their own choice. Always. That will never change. A person always has to make their own choice. But by guarding them is creating the environment to make a positive choice, giving them the knowledge, the power to do so. So parents who are dealing with the one child who is having a hard time, could be 3 or 4, if you're in a classroom, could be many more, usually ignore other siblings. Siblings not knowing how to cope feel left out and neglected. Often younger siblings copy the behaviors of the bigger brother or sister, and soon they might also be involved in some of these risky behaviors. Risky behaviors also rippled outward, affecting the community. Teens engaging in risky behaviors frequently drop out of school by the time they reach high school. The event leading to the decision to drop out of high school usually started in junior high. Dropping out of school has serious consequences for the individual and the community. Without an education, the better high-paying jobs are forever out of reach. Most people who drop out of school drop out of the better opportunities that society has offered. And that's due to education. A lot of places you can't even get a job now without a high school diploma. You have to go back and get your GED. They want to see commitment, and that's what they're looking for. They resign themselves to a life of poverty and dependence upon governmental programs in order to meet their daily needs. Now, one thing to say here, because we're going to have to stop, and the teacher that comes after me is going to go back, because this is going to be recovered and then tied back into how it ripples outwardly. So when we start back in our next class, we're going to get some more detail in this as we move forward. But if somebody drops out of school, I know of a couple people. If someone tells you dropped out, you'll never amount to anything, that's a lie. You can amount to anything you want to do. You just have to have the right people in your life to give you direction. You can be a high school dropout and you can run a multi-million-dollar company. You just have to have the right people to give you the right direction, who care more about you as a person and not about your money. And you can succeed. But you still need to get an education. I'm not saying drop out of school to go do what you want to do, and I'm not saying money fixes problems. I'm saying that if you're sitting back and thinking, I'll never be able to get anywhere in life, you can do whatever you want to do as long as you have the right person. The person that I've known that's helped many people is the author of The Peaceful Solution. Not through handouts of money, but through education and direction. Through leading people, you can do this, this, and this, but you got to do it the right way. And people can be very successful. I've seen him help people for the 28 years I've known him. I've seen him give many people direction through this program, and I've seen people with this program who have never met the author, who are not even in this country, succeed just by the use of this program. When society told them they couldn't improve, they were able to improve. We're going to stop right here. So the last paragraph, we're going to stop on that because there's going to be some recoverage and then moving forward. Once again, for those of you that might not have heard the beginning of class, our certified teachers, we're going to be taking off for a week to go through more certification ourselves. So the next class will be on 4/7/2021. So it'll just be in about a week and a half, and we'll join back with everyone to discuss more about these topics we talked about tonight, which are the most challenging topics to teach in a school, and we'll be able to address more on how to address these things in a classroom atmosphere as long as community atmosphere. Thank you very much for joining us.